Once again, you're welcome to Waidsum University, and you're welcome to this course, Information Privacy Engineering and Privacy by Design. Without much ado, let's begin. Now, today we're looking at Chapter 9, other privacy engineering things, other topics in privacy engineering. These are the things we're looking at today. Now, first of all, we're going to look at what we call the data loss prevention. First of all, what is data loss? Data loss is simply when there is an intentional or unintentional release of information to an untrusted environment. So when you intentionally or unintentionally release the very vital personally identifiable information or release of any data or sort of to an untrusted environment. Now, what do we do in order to ensure that we do not counter this problem? We have what we call the data loss prevention, the DLP, data loss prevention. Now, the data loss prevention is a holistic approach that covers the people, the processes, and the systems that identify, that monitors, and protect data in use, data in motion, and data in at rest. You remember we have three states of data. We have data in use, data in motion, and data at rest. So any comprehensive or a holistic approach that covers the people, the processes, and the systems that identify and monitor and protect the three states of data, such system is known as data loss prevention. Now, this data loss prevention is also known as data leakage prevention. Now, let's move on. Now, let's take a look at data classification and identification. First and foremost, we must be able to classify data into different levels or different categories, or we should be able to identify data in different categories. The first and foremost is to know whether a given data is a sensitive data or the data is a personally identifiable information within any given enterprise or an organization, and that the enterprise need to be protected at all time and in all places. That's the first point. So we must identify or find out whether a given data is a sensitive data. That's number one. And whether also whether it's a personally identifiable information. And then within an organization. And then we should also know that the enterprise needs to be protected at all time and in all places. That's the first step, okay, in identifying data. The second step is that the enterprise needs to define what it refers to as a sensitive data, because what may be sensitive to one enterprise may not be sensitive to another enterprise. So a given enterprise needs to define what she calls a sensitive data, and if necessary establish the different levels of sensitive data if the enterprise can go a little further. Then there is need to recognize sensitive data wherever you encounter them in an enterprise. Then we must also there must be applications that can recognize, like a software system that can recognize sensitive data in real time in an enterprise. Okay, now data classification and identification, still on that, you can classify data and identify data based on these four principles. The first one is the rule-based principle, which usually takes a look at the regular expressions that we normally use. If we the keywords, when we write something, there are some keywords that takes you to the heart of the data or brings the data out for you. Then other very basic pattern matching techniques are best suited also for this type of rule-based system. Rule-based system matching can efficiently identify data blocks, can also identify data files, can identify the database itself, the database records, and so on and so forth. Now, the second type is called the database fingerprinting. The database fingerprinting techniques recognizes is a technique that searches for the exact match to data loaded from a database. Only the data that is loaded to that particular database that it can recognize. It includes the multiple fields combination, such as your name, your credit card number, your CVV numbers in your debit cards. Okay, this is a time-consuming process anyway, or time-consuming techniques, but it has a very low false positive rate. Okay, so meaning it's safe to use, but it's time-consuming. Then the fourth one is the exact file matching. This particular technique for exact file involves computing the hash value of a file and monitoring for any files that match that exact fingerprints. So we compute the hash value and find anything that matches with that hash value. Okay, so the fourth one is the partial document matching. This one, the technique involves looking for a partial match on a protected document. If you have a protected document, anything that matches it, then it goes for it. It involves the use of multiple hashes on portions of documents, such that if a portion of the document is extracted and filed elsewhere or pasted into an email, it can be detected. Like the one we have when we say plagiarism, the software that we use for searching for plagiarism. So wherever you copied it from, it's going to tell us, okay, this is this portion or so thing, so paragraph, so passage, so file is copied from so place. So partial document matching. Okay, so data classification and identification can be seen from these 4 basic rules. Okay, now let's move on. Then we have what we call data state. Just like you have matter exists in 3 states, data exists in 3 states in this regard. The first state is called data at rest. The second state is data in motion, and the third state is data in use. So data at rest is defined as the data in a stable storage system that are not often updated. Data in a very stable, secure storage system that are usually not updated. These are called data at rest. The objective of data loss protection is to locate and catalog sensitive information stored throughout the enterprise in this regard. Like good examples are corporate files stored on servers, corporate files that are stored on servers and or stored on cloud storage. Okay, these are good examples. The data in motion. Data in motion is defined as the data that is moving through any kinds of internal and external network. Data that is moving or that is being transmitted or being received within the internal network, local area network, or even outside network to a wider area network. But the objective of the data loss protection, the DLP, is to monitor and control the movement of sensitive information across enterprise network. Good examples are email attachment, web upload and downloads, instant messages, and so on and so forth. Then the third state of data is the data in use. The data in use is defined as the data that are in the process of being generated, that are in the process of being updated, be processed, be erased, or be viewed through various endpoint interfaces. So these are data in use. Now the objective of the DLP, the data loss protection, is the DLP. The objective of the data loss protection is to monitor and control the movement of sensitive information on end user system. Now, a good example is the data processing by the office applications, viewing or editing PDF files, database functions, and so on and so forth. Okay, now let's move on quickly. So these are the 3 states that we've looked at. This is data at rest. The first one, this first diagram, is the data at rest. Let's take a look at this. This is the data at rest state. You see the storage, the data is at rest, nothing is happening to it. The DLP, that's the data loss protection data recovery agent, is just checking. Okay, this data is there. Then the second state is called data in motion. This is called this data in motion, the second state of data. It's called the data in motion. Here, we have two endpoints. We have the endpoint here, which is the source, and then we have another endpoint, which is the destination. Remember, we say it's data in motion. So every data has where it's being transmitted to where it's being received. So the point of transmission is the source, and the point of reception is the destination. Now, this is data in motion. The data moves through a link. Here is just a gateway, the DLP gateway, the data loss protection gateway, to check and find out, okay, this data is in motion. Then we have the third state of data, just like we have three states of matter, like I said earlier on. So the third state of data is the data in use. The data in use, we have the endpoint and endpoint on both ends as well, actually. So we have the data either be viewed, be downloaded, be uploaded, and so on and so forth through a channel. So this is called figure 9.1, which is the data loss protection models. Okay, now let's move on to the next one quickly. Now, the data loss protection model, or data loss protection for emails. Now let's take a look at this. An example of applying DLP to emails is a policy promulgated by the US Department of Commerce. Now, this document defines a P3 standard used to determine whether an email contains sensitive, personally identifiable information or non-sensitive, personally identifiable information, or even the combination of both of them. And that when both of them are being combined, then it will become a sensitive, personally identifiable information. Now, the P3 hierarchy in order are as follows. One is the social security number. Number two is your passport number. Number three is your driver's license or state identification number. Number three is your bank account or your credit card numbers. Number four is your bank account and credit card number. Number five is your medical information. Number six is your date of birth, and your number seven is your mother's maiden name. So these informations have personally, or they are sensitive, personally identifiable information, which the data loss protection has to go through and scan through and filter these out of the data that is being sent from any enterprise network. Okay, now let's move on. Take a look at that. Leads us to what we call the egress and the ingress scanning. So first of all, what is egress scanning? Egress scanning holistically take a look at all your outgoing messages from your network. Okay, they are subject to P3 for personally identifiable information. So the scanning of your outgoing messages, your outgoing email, to ensure that there is complete and holistic P3 to remove all the sensitive, personally identifiable information is called egress scanning. It's called egress scanning. Now, we say the data loss protection system quarantine any email. They always quarantine any email with a match and sends an email sender an auto-generated email message describing the possible violations and the quarantines of the email message. Okay, the quarantines of the email message and the steps necessary to release the email message to the intended recipient. The options that you have is just to encrypt the email, remove the sensitive, personally identifiable information. Okay, and then you contact the privacy office if need be. Okay, then the second aspect is called the ingress scanning. The ingress is just to scan what is coming to your network, your enterprise network. It's a DLP system which scans the incoming email to any enterprise network. Is called ingress scanning. The system blocks any incoming email message containing any personally identifiable information entering the network. So that's what this does. It scans through every message entering your enterprise network and blocks every sensitive, personally identifiable information that is coming to your network. Now let's move on quickly. So here we have the DLP as architecture. Here we talk about the data in their three states. you have the data in their three states. First and foremost, before we looked at the data in their three states, we have the data governance. Under the data governance, which we are going to do, I think in chapter 40 or 50 of this, we will look at the policies and standards that governs or that helps to govern data. We look at the identification, the type of data, risk assessment. Hope this type of informations will not lead us to problems. We look at the classification, architecture, and quality. Okay. Then after data governance, we look at data loss prevention controls. In that, we look at the functions areas in the different three states of data: the data in motion, the data in use, and the data at rest. And here you see the different functionality that are applicable to each of these three states of data. In the area in the data in motion, we have perimeter security. This is one of the functional areas that we look at. The network monitoring, we monitor the network. The internal access control, we look at it. Data collection and exchanges and messages, email, and so on and so forth. Then under the data in use, we look at privileged user monitoring, because we're talking about data in use. This is another state of data. We look at the privileged user monitoring. We looked at the access or use monitoring. We looked at access or usage monitoring. We look at data anonymization. We look at use of test data. We look at data reduction, and we export safe control. Then other data at rest, we look at the endpoint security, the host encryption, the mobile device protection, other data in storage or data at rest. Okay, we look at the network internal storage, and we look at physical media control, and so on and so forth. Then supporting information security processes. Supporting information security processes, and here we look at a different segment. First, identification and access management, digital rights management. We look at the management aspect, access management, and business continuity. And then we looked at the security information, event management, incident response, and so on and so forth. So then we look at configuration management, physical security, employee screening, and vetting, and so on and so forth. Then we look at vulnerability management training, the first segment, vulnerability management training and awareness, and third-party management and assurance, change management, and so on and so forth. So these are all the segments of the data loss protection architecture. Now let's move on to the main thing of today, which is the Internet of Things. The things of the Internet of Things. First of all, the IoT, which is called the Internet of Things. The term IoT refers to expanding the interconnection of smart devices. Okay, the interconnections of smart devices in our home, ranging from appliances and to tiny sensors that we have in our home, like your smart earpiece, smart mouse, your smart television, smart sound system, fire alarm system, your sound burglary system, your smart burglary alarm system, your smart microwave, smart washing machines, smart TV, just name it, smart musical instruments, musical devices that you have in your homes. All of these things, they are interconnected now. They work it together. They communicate with one another, and be able using sensors and actuators to get it done. But here are the characteristics of these smart devices that we use in our home, which is called the Internet of Things. Now, number one of it is that these devices, they have what we call the low bandwidth. They have low power consumption. They have low repetition data capture and low bandwidth data usage appliances that communicate with each other and with higher level devices. Now, the user interface for the Internet of Things device may be tightly constrained by limited display size and functionality, or the device might only be able to be controlled via remote means. So most of these smart devices in our homes, they are controlled with remote. Okay, you have smart ceiling fan now. You use remote to control your ceiling fan. You use remote to control your air conditions. You have smart air conditioning. You have smart lighting system. You have smart musical system. you have smart televisions, you have smart microwave, you have smart portable devices, cookie devices, and all of these things. You have smart ovens, and so on and so forth. So these smart devices, they are actually communicating with themselves, because in them are what we call chip, micro integrated circuit chips that are created or embedded in them, or what we call the microcontroller, more significantly. So they communicate with themselves, and all of these things, they form what we call the Internet of Things. They form what we call the Internet of Things. Here is the Internet of Things component, the things that are found in every device that qualifies as Internet of Things. Number one, in them you find sensors. They can sense whatever is around the environment. Okay, they have actuator. Remember, sensors convert physical parameters of pressure, like pressure, temperature, light intensity, any physical parameters, into electrical signal. Okay, while actuator then reconvert these electrical signals into physical parameters, as it were. So every Internet of Things device has sensor in them, has an actuator in them. They have what we call a memory in them. You see, they have a storage. They have storage in them. They have microcontroller in them for programming, and okay. They have battery in them, and they have the transceiver, an antenna, like something to transmit and receive the communication. Remember, I said they communicate with one another, so they're able to communicate with themselves. So they must have a transceiver to transmit and receive information or data. Okay. Now let's move on quickly. Now the Internet of Things, they use a very significant technology called the RFID. This RFID is radio frequency identification. Now, an Internet of Things device typically contain a radio frequency identification component. They must have a radio frequency identification component. Remember, radio frequency identification component comprises of tag and reader. Now, radio frequency identification technology uses what we call the radio waves to identify items, and it's increasingly becoming an enabling technology for the Internet of Things. This is not the only technology, okay, that could be available for Internet of Things. What another technology that is available for Internet of Things is the WIMAS. WIMAS is a technology that can be used by Internet of Things. Okay. Another one is Bluetooth. Okay, a technology that can be available for Internet of Things to communicate. Internet of Things devices to communicate is the Bluetooth. But however, this RFID is becoming and gradually becoming very popular among the Internet of Things devices. Now, the main element of the radio frequency system are the tag and the reader. Remember, I mentioned this earlier on. The tag and the reader. And the RFID tags are small programmable devices used for objects, animals, and human tracking. They can be used to track a human being. They are tagged. These tags are programmable small devices that can be used to tag or track a human being, track an animal, and track objects. Okay, so that's how these objects, like smart oven, smart microwave, smart TV, smart lighting system, they're able to communicate because they have a tag, which is a programmable device that helps to the objects to track themselves and communicate with themselves. Then, not only do they have tag, remember we also say they have reader. The RFID readers, they acquire and sometimes rewrite information stored on the RFID tag that comes within the operating range. They acquire whatever is in the tag and sometimes rewrite them for later use. Now, typically, RFID readers communicate with a computer system that records and formats the acquired information for further uses, right? RFID components on some devices can transmit considerable information about their devices, raising privacy issues. So, of course, there will definitely be privacy issues because They're using RFID technology, and there is transmission going on from one device to another. Now here is like the ecosystem, the Internet of Things cloud context. Here we have what we call the data center cloud. Here it's about cloud and the routers and so on and so forth. Here you have hundreds of devices. After this nomenclature, we have a core network, which is thousands of devices connected to the core networks that route to the cloud. Then after that, we have the fog network. The fog network has tens of thousands of devices connected. Here you have the data center, the routers, and whatever it is on the network. Then you have the edge network. Here is millions of devices connected on the edge network, where you normally find your devices, your smart devices, connected on this edge network for the Internet of Things. Okay, now let's move on. We look at let's quickly take a look at the comparison of cloud and fog. Okay, here you can just take a look. Your cloud and your fog networks. Okay, we're comparing based on some parameters, the locations, the latency, the access, and so on and so forth. The cloud one is usually at the center, and they usually have high latency. While fog, they are at the edge, they have low latency. And in terms of access, the cloud network have fixed or wireless access, and the fog networks are usually wireless, and so on and so forth. Okay, so you can just take a good look at this. Now let's take a look at the capability of an Internet of Things component. First of all, we have what we call the transduction region. In the transduction region, you have what we call the transducer capability. The transducer capability is to be able to sense any available parameters or any available physical parameters like temperature, heat, humidity, light, intensity, and all of these things that are available. Then we have the actuating part of this transduction. The actuating part is to hence convert the electrical. You remember the sensing part, convert this physical parameter to an electrical signal, convert your wave, your heat, your temperature, your pressure to electrical signal, maybe to current and voltages. And then the job of the actuator is to hence convert the electrical signals such as electric current, such as voltages, such as power, into physical parameter again. So then the second part is the data capability when you're looking at the Internet of Things. Okay, the capability of the Internet of Things components, the components. The second capability is the data capability. Now, the data capability, here we have the ability of the data to be transferred. Okay, here data can be transferred, data can be processed, and data can be stored. These are the capability of the data in this environment. Then the third interface, the third nomenclature, the third segment is the interface capability. Here, in the Internet of Things, all the smart devices on the Internet of Things are able to carry out what we call the application interface. They're able to undergo application, using application software and application interface. And they have what we call the human user interface, because we still use them, and there's an interface between us and them. And then we have the network interface. They're connected to the network because they're smart devices. So there's your smart TV is connected to, you can use your Wi-Fi to connect to your smart TV. So this interface, using your router, your hub, your bridges, and all of these things, it's your network interface. Okay? Then the last but not the least capability of Internet of Things component is the supporting capability. They're able to support operating system, device management, security, cyber security capability, and privacy capability. Okay, now let's move on quickly. Now we say the challenges of the Internet of Things ecosystem. Here we say the European Union Agency for Network and Information Security, ENISA, baseline security recommendation for Internet of Things lists the following issues that hinder the development of a secure Internet of Things ecosystem. So these things that we're about to list, they hinder the development of secure Internet of Things ecosystem. The first is the very large attack surface. Very large attack surface. Okay? This one will hinder the progress of security of the Internet of Things. When there are too many attacks on the surface of Internet of Things, this will hinder the security of the Internet of Things in the entire ecosystem. Then limited device resources. Okay, this one will also hinder the development and security of Internet of Things. The complex ecosystem, because it's increasingly very complex. More and more smart things are being introduced. So if you go to most modern homes, you see everything communicates. Now we have a metaverse. So things now communicate, even in real time segmentation. So you can see this is coming as also bringing security, because as more and more things are added to the connections of the Internet of Things, or the smartness of the Internet of Things, then you see that there will be security issues and so on and so on, and privacy issues, and so on and so forth. Fragmentation of standards and regulations. Okay, the ability to regulate the standards and fragment them to different sections is increasingly becoming an issue for the security of Internet of Things. The widespread deployment and then security integrations and the safety aspects, all of these are becoming issues for the development of secured Internet of Things ecosystem. Low cost, lack of expertise available to use all these things properly, and then security updates, not updating all the security features and as at when due, insecure programming and clear liability. All these things are increasingly giving way to insecure Internet of Things ecosystem. Now let's move on. The Internet of Things security objectives. Let's take a look at the objective as defined by NISTIR 8200. Now, one of the objective is saying that restricting logical access to the Internet of Things network. Okay, we must be restricting logical access to the Internet of Things network. This is one of the objectives for security reasons. We have to restrict the access to the Internet of Things network, because if every Tommy, Dick, and Harry have access to it, and then we're risking the security of the Internet of Things. Then another thing is the restrictive physical access to the Internet of Things network and components. Even the physical access, because once we set up an Internet of Things in our homes, then we should restrict even the physical access to these things in order not to jeopardize the comprehension of the Internet of Things that has been set up in our homes. Then another thing is the preventing unauthorized modification of data. Preventing unauthorized modification of data in order to prevent the people the tampering with the data on the Internet of Things, and hence to prevent this will ensure that the Internet of Things network is secure, or the entire ecosystem is secure. Then another thing to look at is detecting security events and incidents. Okay, detecting security events and incidents is one of the objectives of Internet of Things securities. Then maintaining functionality during adverse condition and restoring the system after an incident is also the objective of security. We should be able to restore the system if something has happened to it. Okay, now let's move on. The IoT privacy. Let's take a look at the privacy of the Internet of Things. Now, because of the distinct requirements of the Internet of Things environment, it is useful to recast the definition of the privacy in terms that relates to this environment, the environment of the Internet of Things. So according to Zigadov, it defines the privacy in the Internet of Things as a threshold guarantee. Now, this as a threefold guarantee. Now, these threefold guarantees includes: one, awareness of the privacy risk. We must be aware of the privacy risk imposed by the Internet of Things devices and services. Yes, there's a privacy risk because these devices are communicating with one another, okay, and also communicating with a network. So there is we should be aware of the awareness of the privacy risk. That's number one. Number two is the individual control over the collections and process of personal information by the IoT device and services. We should be aware of the individual control over the collections and process of personal information in the Internet of Things device and services. Then the third one is awareness and control of the subsequent use and dissemination of personal information by data controller to any entity outside the subject's personal control sphere. So we should be aware and we have awareness and the control of subsequent use and dissemination of personal information. So these three things are the three folds or three bedrock of the privacy use of the Internet of Things. Now here is the Internet of Things model. Now in this model we have what we call the data subject, which is us, the data subject, the principal personally identifiable information, the principal or the subject principal of the personally identifiable information. Then after that we have what we call I'm trying to see if we can highlight. After that, we have what we call the Internet of Things. Okay, like this, we can see they are already segmented. Okay, we don't have to bother ourselves about this. After that, we have the Internet of Things devices, like your chip, microchip. Sometimes they place chip inside your body. They can place chips, microchips inside your body, wearable and implanted. They can implant them in your body. Okay, these are also Internet of Things devices. All these microchips that we can implant in our body and go and be spying in other places. These are Internet of Things. Okay, then smart devices system. They are Internet of Things. They are Internet of Things. Then the sensors, the Internet of Things. The surveillance systems, the security cameras. These are anything that provides surveillance. These are Internet of Things. The RFID tags, the Internet of Things, mobile devices, your mobile phone, your smartphones, they are all Internet of Things. The security devices are Internet of Things. Then the intermediate devices in the Internet of Things architecture, we look at the gateways. We'll be looking at the different gateways. We look at routers to transmit your data out of your local area network. Then we have the controllers, like the microcontrollers and so on, programmable controllers. We have the processors. The different processors like the 55 timers, the microcontrollers, all of these type of processors. Then we have what we call the enterprise system, and this is the first segment, okay, which is called the data dissemination region. Remember, the first one is the information collection region, which is the one where we measure the Internet of Things devices like the microchip I mentioned, the smart devices, the sensors, the surveillance devices, the RFID, the mobile devices, and so on and so forth, security devices. All these ones, they are called the information collection regions of the Internet of Things devices. Then the intermediate devices, we measure the different gateways through which this information can be sent through, can pass through. We talk about router, gateways, controller, and processors. Then the last one is the enterprise system. The enterprise system includes your cloud, your data centers, and your server farms. These are the data dissemination region. The one we talked about, the intermediate device, where we talked about gateway, router, controllers, processors. These are called the data transmission regions of the Internet of Things. Is that okay? So this is called, what we have just holistically described, is called the Internet of Things model. Now let's move on quickly to cloud computing. Okay, for the sake of time. In NIST 800-140, it said the definition of cloud computing is as follows. It said it's a model for enabling ubiquitous, convenient, on-demand network access to shared pools of configurable computing resources. So a model for enabling any convenient, on-demand network access to a shared pool of configurable computing resources, such as your network, your server, your storage, your applications, and your services. All of them working together hand in hand. This is called computing. It's called computing. Is that okay? That can be rapidly provisioned and released with minimal management effort. They compute with themselves because they've been computed. They can conveniently communicate with themselves with minimal management effort put in place, or service provider interaction. Nothing is interactive. All these things can start communicating with themselves. Okay. This cloud model promotes availability and is composed of 5 element characteristics, 3 service model, and 4 deployment model. We're going to look at each of them. First, we look at the 5 essential characteristics, and then we look at 3 service model and the 4 deployment model. Now, these are the first one is the essential characteristics, which are five. The essential characteristics for cloud computing. The essential characteristics for any cloud computing. One is the broad network access. Two is rapid elasticity. Three is measured service. Four is on-demand self-service. And the fifth one is resource pooling. Okay, then after that, we're looking at the service model. The service model also comprises of three services. The first one is called the software as a service. Software as a service. The second one is platform as a service. The third one is infrastructure as a service. So it has three service model. Okay, it has three service characteristics or three service model. Then the last segment is the deployment model. The deployment model is made up of public, private, hybrid, and community. We're going to describe each of these, okay, as we go further. We're going to define each segment of these cloud computing elements. So all of these are called the cloud computing elements. They are made up of three segments: the essential characteristics, the service model, and the deployment model. Okay. Okay, let's move on to the next. Okay, this is the deployment model. Okay, if we must circle it, and let's move on to the next one. The cloud computing element, like we said, they are made up of five essential characteristics, which are the broad network access, the rapid elasticity, the measured service, on-demand self-service, and resource pooling. Now let's take a look at the three, what we call the three service model. The three service model are: one, the software as a service, platform as a service, and infrastructure as a service. These are the three service model in cloud computing. Now let's go to the third one, which is called the deployment model in cloud computing. So there are three things we talked about in cloud computing. The computing element, essential characteristics. There are five. We measured them, the essential characteristics. And then we went to what we call the service model. There are three: software as a service, platform as a service, and infrastructure as a service. The last one is the deployment model, which are four. Okay, we could say the public cloud, the private cloud, and the community cloud, and the hybrid cloud. Now, the public cloud is a cloud infrastructure that is made available to the general public or large industry group, and it's owned by either an organization selling cloud services to to different or other organizations. Then the cloud service provider is responsible both for the cloud infrastructure and for the control of data and operation within the cloud. The cloud service provider is responsible, one, for the cloud infrastructure, two, for the control of data and the operation within the cloud. Okay, these are for the public cloud. Then we have what we call the private cloud. The private cloud are in two different segments. The private cloud, the cloud infrastructure is operated solely by an organization. Okay, like our umbrella big university, parent university, Al Madina International University, they have their own cloud, private cloud that they operate, they develop to operate their university. Okay, and then it may also be for private cloud. It may also be we are a private cloud. Waidsum University is a private cloud computing system, but we are hosted by another organization that provides a solely dedicated private cloud computing for us. Okay, so it may be managed by an organization or a third party and may exist on the premises or off the premises. Then again, the cloud service provider is responsible solely for the infrastructure and for the control. Then the community cloud, this is when the cloud infrastructure is shared by several organizations or by like a support-based, community-based thing that is that share the same concern, on anything that is being supported on the cloud. Okay, the third one is the hybrid cloud. The cloud infrastructure is a composition of two or more clouds that remain unique entities that are bound together by standardized and proprietary technology that enables the data and application portability. Okay, the hybrid cloud is cloud infrastructure, and is a composition of two or more clouds that remain unique entity. Two or more clouds come together to be like one entity, okay? Work together to achieve their goals. Now here the figure 9.8 shows private cloud configuration. Here in this private cloud configuration, you can see the private cloud is on the enterprise network. It's inside the enterprise network. The private cloud is inside the enterprise network. Then this is one way of having a private cloud. Then we have another way of having a private cloud. Here you see that the private cloud is outside the enterprise network. It's outside. Okay, cloud provider. See, the cloud provider is separate from the enterprise network. So this is called outsourced private cloud, and this is called on-premise private cloud. So we have two types of private cloud: outsourced private cloud and on-premise private cloud. And let's move on. Here is a public cloud configuration. Here is a public cloud configuration. You can see the public cloud provider, service provider, and here is the enterprise. They provide for this enterprise, they provide to another enterprise, and so on and so forth. So it's a public, it's not owned by one person. It's not a dedicated cloud. So here, threat for cloud system users. There are three areas issued by the ITUT list the following threat for cloud service users: responsibility ambiguity, loss of governance, and loss of trust. So these are three areas that provide threat for cloud service users. Responsibility ambiguity, because sometimes it may be that the enterprise-owned system relies on the services from a cloud service provider. You are relying on them. So there may be sometimes responsibility ambiguity, because you are relying on another company to provide your hosting, and this may be an ambiguous concept. Then the level of service provided determines the magnitude of resources that are uploaded or offloaded from the IT system to the cloud system. So if you upload a lot of things to the cloud, then your service might be slow, okay, based on your limited bandwidth or your given bandwidth that is dedicated to you as an enterprise. Regardless of the level of service, it is difficult to define precisely the security responsibility of the customers and those of the cloud service provider. Okay, sometimes things, when they happen, you don't know if it's your fault as a company or it's coming from the cloud service provider. Loss of governance. The migration of part of the enterprise IT resources to cloud infrastructure gives a partial management control to the cloud service provider. So because you've migrated all your IT infrastructure or IT resources to the cloud, then the cloud service provider already have access to all your concept. Okay, so there may be loss of governance. You may not be totally in charge because other people are the one providing the cloud computing for you or hosting your data in the cloud for you. The degree of loss of governance depend on the cloud service model, depend on the model that you're using. Okay. Now the last one is the loss of trust. It is sometimes difficult for a cloud service provider or a cloud service user to assess the cloud service provider's trust level due to the black box nature of the cloud service that is available. Okay, sometimes it's a black box because you don't see them. You don't see these people. You don't even know their office. Sometimes they're not even in your country. They're in a faraway country. So there's a black box. So there could be loss of trust. So because sometimes the cloud service provider can just bring down your entire network for just a misconcept. Okay, there is no way to obtain and share the service provider security level in the formalized manner. You cannot know the security level that they have. So there's loss of trust between the client and the cloud service provider. The threat for cloud service users include the service provider lock-in, the non-secure cloud service user access, the lack of asset management, and data loss and leakages. Okay, so there are 4 threats for cloud service users. Your service provider lock-in. So a sequence of loss of governance could be a lack of freedom in terms of how to replace one cloud service provider with another one. Okay, this could be loss of governance because you don't even know how to switch from maybe GoDaddy to Bluehost. Okay, so you don't know how to switch from one cloud service provider to another cloud service provider. So that could be, you could be locked in, like you are stranded. Okay, then another one threat for cloud service user is non-secure cloud service user access. So as most of the resources deliveries are through the remote connections, unprotected APIs are among the easiest attack vectors. So if you have an unprotected APIs or plugins in your enterprise, then they will be easily be attacked, because sometimes you don't even know the level of protection or security protection you have at your cloud level. Attack methods such as phishing, fraud, and exploitations of software vulnerability pose significant threat to the enterprise network. Then the number 3, the third one is lack of asset management, which is a threat for cloud service users. The lack of asset management. Now, a cloud service user may have difficulty assessing and monitoring asset management by the cloud service provider. They may not be able to even know or assess or monitor the asset that the cloud service provider has, the level of integrity they have. They may not. Key elements of interest includes locations of sensitive asset information, degree of physical control for data storage, reliability of data backups. What reliability do you have that your data are backed up properly? Okay, reliability of data backup and countermeasures for business continuity and disaster recovery. So these things are there. Lack of asset management. Okay. Furthermore, cloud service users also have the important concerns related to the exposures of data to foreign governments and compliance with privacy laws. Because if the US government wants to know about anything, remember some of these, your cloud service provider, they are agents of the United States. So they can easily disclose your whatever you have to them. So this is a big lack of asset management. This is a big issue. The data loss and leakage. Loss of an encryption key or a privileged access code will bring a serious problem to the cloud service user. Once you lost your encryption key, your password, all of these things. Once these things are lost, or a privileged access code, and then this will bring a lot of issues to cloud service users. Accordingly, lack of cryptographic management information leads to sensitive damages such as data loss and unexpected leakages to the outside world. So these are threats. These 4 threats, we've described them as threats to cloud service users. One of it is service provider lock-in. You don't even know how to change your cloud service provider to another cloud service provider. Another one is non-secure cloud service user access, lack of asset management, and data loss and leakage. Okay? Now let's take a look at, before we move on, this table 9.5, privacy principle and protection measure in cloud computing. Here we look at the data life cycle stage, and then we look at the collection stage, the storage stage, the sharing and processing stage, and the deletion stage. Then we look at the privacy principle and the privacy protection measure. So under the privacy principle for collection, proportionality and purpose specification must be adhered to. Data minimization under the privacy principle. So you take a look at this table to get this information. Now let's get to data collections. Now you remember a cloud service provider, CSP, is responsible for protecting the identity of the person who access cloud services. There is their responsibility to protect whoever access cloud services. Now, the customers should be able to access applications data without revealing to the service provider more personal information than is strictly necessary to verify the customer's right. The anonymous credential is an example of mechanism for protecting the privacy of the cloud service cloud customer. An anonymous credential is one way or one mechanism that we use to protect the customers. They don't have to disclose everything about themselves. So once they obtain the anonymous credentials, then they will be able to access the cloud, and the system should recognize them with these credentials. Now here, this type of mechanism enables the user to obtain credential from one organization and then later prove possession of the credential to another organization without revealing any detail of him or herself or the personally identified, sensitive personally identified, without revealing the sensitive personally identifiable information. The anonymous credential system also allows selective disclosure by permitting the user to reveal some credential attributes or prove that they satisfy some properties while hiding all the other credential attributes information that are available, okay, with the cloud service user. Okay, let's move on to the next one. That still on data collection. Another thing we use is the identity mixer developed by IBM. It provides one means of implementing anonymous credentials. Identity mixer enables the user to selectively disclose only those attributes that are required by the verifier and can also do without being leakable across the transaction. Now let's take a look at the scheme involves two principles, what we call the flexible public key and the flexible credentials. These are the two principles that are used with identity mixer. Now, in the flexible public keys, rather than being bound to a single public key, users can have many independent public keys called pseudonyms. Now, these pseudonyms for the same secret key so that they can use a different pseudonyms for each verifier or even for each section every time they want to use a different section. Okay, this is for the flexible public key. Therefore, flexible credentials, the credentials that certify the user's attribute can be transformed into valid tokens. For any of the user's pseudonyms that contains only a subset of the attributes in the original credentials. Okay, now let's move on still on data collection. Microsoft offers a different mechanism called the wou.proof that has the same capability as the identity mixer. Okay, wou.proof. The Microsoft offer the same mechanism and they call it the wou.proof. Okay, and it has the same abilities, same capability as the identity mixer. A wou.proof token is a new type of credential similar to the PKI certificates that can encode attributes to any type or but with two important differences. What are the two important differences between the wou.proof and the normal PKI certificates or the normal identity mixers? Is one, the issuance and presentation of a token is unleakable due to the special types of public key and signature encoded in the token. Okay, special type of public key and there's a signature encoded on the token. Now the cryptographic wrapping of the attributes contain no correlation handles, and this prevents unwanted tackling of users when they use their wou.proof tokens, even by the colluding insiders. So no one can attack you easily. So the issue and presentation of token is or leakable due to the special type of public key and signature that is encoded in it, other the U-proof. Then the second one is user can minimally disclose information about what attributes are encoded in the token in response to dynamic verifier policies. Okay, so these are what makes it super good, the U-proof developed by Microsoft. Okay, remember the other ones, the identity mixer is developed by IBM. Okay, now let's go to storage. We are done with data collection. Let's go to storage in your cloud. The cloud service provider has a duty to maintain the confidentiality of any of your personal data that is being stored and processed in the cloud. Okay, now the primary mechanism by which the cloud service provider protects all customers' data, including the personally identifiable information, is encryption. So what they use is encryption. They encrypt your data so that other people cannot decrypt and use or have access to data that is or your network. They make your network encrypted so that other people cannot just have access and use, except when you are using public source network. Okay, now let's move on quickly. So what they do, the cloud service provider, they encrypt your entire enterprise network. The primary difficulty with your database encryption is that online processes of the data becomes very challenging when this is done to your network. Okay, so a straightforward solution to the security problem is this context is to encrypt the entire database and not provide the encryption or decryption keys to the service provider. So you can encrypt it and you don't give your service provider your encryption and decryption key. Okay, the only job it does for you is to host you in the cloud. That's it. Now this solution by itself is inflexible. Yeah, it's super difficult. It's not flexible. The user has little ability to access individual data items based on searches or indexing on the key parameters, but rather has to download the entire table every time from the database and decrypt the table and work with the result. So it's cumbersome. It's cumbersome. To provide more flexibility, it must be possible to work with the database in its encrypted form. Okay, we must be able to work with database in its encrypted form. So in this case, this is a database encryption scheme. This is you say query. Okay, a database that is already encrypted, you have to send this original query sent here. This is a client. Okay, this is a user sent to this place. Query processor will process it, encrypt and decrypt with the help of a metadata, and then after that it will be sent to a transform query. Okay, query executor, transform query executor will execute it. Encrypted database. This is an encrypted database. So here you have the server to access, and then message encrypted result will be back to you, and then it will be decrypted and then sent as a plain text result to this original person that has made this inquiry. So we should be able to have access to this. This is the data owner. This data owner, you see, is a metadata. This data owner, this is the database, this is the metadata. Also has to agree, kind of send agreement to this place, and so that eventually you'll be able to access the data. Now let's go to still on storage. The cryptographic cloud storage describe a scheme that enable multiple users to access portions of an encrypted cloud-based database without having the possession of encryption key, without having the encryption key in your possession. So you'll be able to have access. You'll be able to have access to the data in the storage. Now the architecture consists of 4 components. We have what we call the data processor. We have what we call the data verifier. Let's change this color. What color can we use with this? We have what we call the token generator, and this one is good. We have what we call the credential generator. So the architecture consists of 4 components: the data processor, data verifier, token generator, and credential generator. So these are 4 things, 4 components of the architecture of any stored data. So which, if we have access to all these 4 characteristics, they will be able to have access to the stored data. Now, sharing and processing. Data that is in the cloud, that is stored in the cloud, will be shared and can also be processed regularly, as long as you access your enterprise network. Now, the possibility for users to control his or her personal data as it is processed by the application is a fundamental right? So again, sharing and processing is done in order to provide user with greater transparency and control over their own data. So the job of the cloud service provider is to implement a dashboard that can be used to summarize data used by the applications and provide links to personal setting controls. An example of standards of defining policy language for expressing information system security policy by E2 is the extensible access control markup language. Okay, extensible access control markup language. Now, with a dashboard solution based on the extensible access control markup language, a user can define preferences to control which entity can access which data according to the policies of the organization. Now, deletion. I think this is the last but not the least. Yeah, deletion. At the end of the contractual relationship between the data subject and his or her cloud service provider, at the end, if you're no longer interested, then the data subject has the right to request that the cloud service provider, deletes his or her data if there are no legitimate grounds for retaining them. So if you decide to host with, for example, another company, you are leaving this company, then you're on the ground to tell them that they have to delete your data that is with them. You're no longer in contract with them. Maybe your contract has expired. Before your contract expired, you already contract another company to host your data and your enterprise network in the cloud for you. And then the previous one, the former, you inform them to delete once your contract is over with them, to delete your data that is with them that they hosted in the first place. Okay, so that's the end of these sections, and these are the areas we've looked at. We looked at the data loss prevention. We looked at the data state, the 3 states of data, the data loss. Then we looked at the scope of the Internet of Things. We looked at the 5 principal components of the Internet of Things enabled. We looked at the relationship between the cloud computing and the Internet of Things. We looked at an overview of cloud computing concept, and then we looked at the principal cloud services. We looked at, or we defined the cloud deployment models, and then we tried to understand the unique security and privacy issues that are related to cloud computing. So with this, we've come to the end of this session. Thank you very much.